Right after the initial shock, the young doctor was instructed to send a team away and keep only the most experienced specialists in the room. No angle could escape the monitoring equipment. Cameras, pressure sensors, electrodes, everything was recording every heartbeat, every brain wave. He positioned himself discreetly in the background, watching. When the millionaire, still looking as if she had returned from another world, tried to speak again, he stepped forward and handed her a notepad and pen. Every syllable would be recorded for posterity. "I saw lights, and you were there," she said, her voice weak but firm. The team exchanged incredulous glances. There were reports of near-death experiences, reports of out-of-body visions, but nothing proven in such a controlled clinical environment. The patient seemed to have crossed a barrier between life and something no one could define. As they took notes, the doctor noticed something unusual, a slight tremor in her right hand, as if she were trying to gesture additional information. He gently held her hand and asked, "What was it like? Was it a dream or something real?" She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "You were following footsteps, each beat of my heart was a guide, and when your touch reached me, I decided to come back." Those words sounded like a direct command to him, as if she saw him as the bridge between worlds. The team left the room for a few minutes, respecting the intimate moment, but not without whispering about broken medical protocols and the need to examine any outside influence. The young doctor felt the weight of the silence as he watched her regain a few motor responses. She moved her head, squeezed his hand, blinked in response to simple commands. Each response was celebrated, each breath marked a victory against what had previously seemed irreversible. At that moment, it became clear that this was not a terminal coma about to end in death. It was the beginning of something rare, possibly unprecedented in modern medicine. He remained by her side, recording every detail, every expression, every hesitation. He knew he would need photos, videos, testimonials, because the world outside would not believe the monitors alone. He would need proof. Still in room 714, he asked the nurse to record his voice as he talked to the patient, recording the tone, the contained emotion, any variation that indicated a surge of consciousness. Although weakened, she smiled slightly when she realized the importance of the moment. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered, and he felt something that could not be put into words, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and responsibility. Outside, there was already talk of a press conference with the family, reports in local newspapers, and special medical coverage. But before all that, there was that living connection between a novice doctor and a patient who had crossed the boundaries of the human body as if it were a portal. The floor attendant, curious, peeked through the crack in the door but was gently removed to keep the environment free of distractions. The young doctor took a deep breath, straightened his lab coat, looked at the monitors one last time before leaving the room, and let out a sigh that mixed euphoria and exhaustion. Outside, the 7th-floor hallway seemed brighter, as if the simple awakening of one person had shed light on the entire hospital. He walked to the break room, grabbed a glass of water, stared at his reflection in the mirror, and muttered to himself, today wasn't just another shift. And as he prepared for the next steps, more detailed tests, reports, contacting the family and the media, you already know, this story is about to get a lot more intense. So, if you haven't clicked subscribe to the channel yet, do it now, turn on the bell, and leave a like. Because the next part will reveal details that will challenge everything you think you know about medicine and life itself. Stay with me to find out what happened after the coma, how the millionaire reacted to the world's gaze, and, most importantly, what she said to the young doctor when she realized she was really back. After the millionaire woke up, the hospital was plunged into a mixture of tension and euphoria. Nothing seemed to be working at its usual pace. Nurses crossed the corridors murmuring theories. Experienced doctors tried to maintain their composure, but it was clear that everyone knew they had witnessed something out of the ordinary. The young doctor, until then an almost anonymous face among the staff on duty, was now greeted with looks of respect. No one knew for sure what he had done, and he himself did not have all the answers. But it was impossible to deny that his presence had been the turning point. In the first 48 hours, the patient was transferred to a more closely monitored ward. The neurological team wanted to understand the extent of her recovery. MRI scans, motor tests, and language assessments were all performed under full clinical supervision. And the results surprised with each new report. Not only had she woken up, but she was showing patterns of brain activity that exceeded her pre-coma state. It was as if her mind had awakened renewed, seeing the world with a clarity that did not fit into medical protocols. During these tests, the young doctor insisted on accompanying her whenever possible. He had formed a bond that even he did not understand. The millionaire, still with motor difficulties and limited speech, made a point of looking for him with her eyes whenever someone entered the room. It was as if he were her only reliable link to reality. And so it was that, in one of those moments of silence, she decided to tell her story. With a firmer voice, between pauses and short breaths, she began to narrate what she remembered. She said that time was different on the other side. That there was a sequence of sounds, vibrations, and images that did not obey the rules of the physical world. That at a certain point, she had become aware of her consciousness hovering above her own body. She could see the doctors, hear fragments of conversations, feel the pain of her family members even though she was unconscious. But despite everything, there was peace. Until his touch, the young doctor's touch, broke something. It was as if a silent voice said, "You're not done yet." She described this touch as charged with presence, something that made her feel that there was still someone on this side really trying to reach her, not just out of obligation, but with empathy. The doctors wrote everything down, skeptical. But the clinical records showed a correlation between the touch and the onset of the first reactive brain waves. Coincidence? Perhaps. But no one there dared to ignore what she was saying. The story gained momentum. The press found out. Headlines appeared in newspapers and websites. Millionaire woman comes out of coma after touch from rookie doctor. Blogs and alternative channels began to explore the idea of spiritual healing, energy touch, synchronicity. The hospital tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The world was fascinated by the case. Interviews were requested. The patient's family, initially reticent, decided to allow her testimony to be recorded, as long as it was controlled. The young doctor was invited to participate. They sat side by side, in front of a discreet camera, in a private room at the hospital. She looked at him with a restrained smile, still fragile, and began by saying, "I woke up because I felt that someone still saw me as a human being, not just a body lying down." It touched everyone present. The video was not sensationalist. It was raw, real. It showed the fragility of the body, the strength of the connection, the breaking of the clinical barrier. And it went viral. In less than 24 hours, the video reached millions of views. It was shared in medical groups, spiritual forums, and motivational pages. Interpretations varied: faith, science, synchronicity, but everyone agreed on one thing: there was something special about that reunion. Meanwhile, internally, the hospital was dealing with an ethical dilemma. Senior doctors questioned the exposure of the case. Others believed it could open doors to new forms of humanized treatment. The young doctor's name began to circulate at conferences, medical forums, and social media as the silent miracle doctor. But he didn't see himself as a hero. Just someone who did what he thought was right, being there. As the days passed, the millionaire showed more signs of recovery. She began to write with difficulty, recall details from her childhood, mention account numbers, addresses, and interrupted projects. And she always, without fail, made a point of telling the new doctor every fragment she remembered. It was as if she trusted him not only with her health, but with her history. In one of these conversations, a detail emerged that intrigued the doctor. She mentioned that while she was unconscious, she remembered a conversation between two doctors in the room, talking about the possibility of turning off the machines. And that, according to her, was what made her decide to fight. The doctor investigated and discovered that such a conversation had indeed taken place during a previous shift, something that had never been communicated to the family. The woman in a coma had heard everything. This changed the course of the clinical investigation. A new study was initiated, focusing on the sensory perception of patients in a coma. The case became a reference in universities, cited in theses and international panels. The young doctor was invited to present the report at conferences, giving rise to a movement that questioned traditional practices in prolonged coma settings. But in the midst of all this, there was something that still needed to be revealed. One night, while reviewing reports in the empty hospital cafeteria, the doctor received a call from the patient herself. With a stronger voice, she said only, "I think I can now tell you what I saw before I came back." He returned to the room. He sat down beside her. And there, in the silence broken only by the beeping of the monitors, she began to describe a sequence of events that seemed to come out of a movie, or another dimension. She spoke of seeing not only the present, but versions of the future. She said she had seen the hospital filled with lights, him being recognized, being called to speak in countries he didn't even know. She said she remembered a child holding a newspaper with his picture on the front page. She said that, in that state between life and death, she could see timelines opening up, possible paths, and that she had chosen to come back because, among all those futures, there was one where he would change the lives of many people. The doctor listened in silence. He felt chills, not from fear, but from something deeper, as if he had been seen inside. She ended by saying, "I can't explain it, but I was sure there was still something that needed to be done. And you were the bridge." That night, he left the hospital without rushing. He walked through the city streets in silence. He had in his hands not just a medical case, but something that would stay with him forever. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew that nothing would ever be the same. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. The story is about to dive into its deepest, most symbolic, and perhaps most difficult to believe point. What you've heard so far isn't the end, it's just the setup. Because what she revealed in that last conversation was not recorded on video, in medical reports, or in public interviews. It was said only once. To him. And for some reason that he also did not yet fully understand, the patient asked him not to tell anyone. Not yet. She said the world needed to prepare. The following days seemed longer, as if time were being stretched out. The hospital, already accustomed to the media buzz, began to deal with visits from journalists, international experts, even religious figures appeared, priests, mediums, gurus, all wanting to interpret the phenomenon. But the young doctor, now a symbol of something he himself did not control, remained on the sidelines of it all. He continued to visit her room, always discreetly, always attentive. It was there, in that space suspended between science and mystery, that he felt needed. During one of these encounters, she asked him to bring her a blank sheet of paper and a pen. With effort, she slowly wrote something that looked like a code, a sequence of numbers interspersed with letters, symbols, and dots. When he asked what it was, she replied casually, "It's what I saw at the end." They called it the door. That was the password. He smiled, believing it to be just a metaphor, an outburst, perhaps a dream mixed with delayed consciousness. But she didn't laugh. She kept her gaze steady and added, "The right time will come. You'll understand." In the weeks that followed, she continued to recover. Her speech became more fluid, her memories clearer, and her motor coordination was successfully rehabilitated. But there was something in the way she looked that gave her away. She was carrying more than just an unusual story. She knew something. She had seen something. And that something seemed to be directly linked to that young doctor. The hospital, realizing the potential of the case, began discussing the publication of an official scientific article highlighting the neuroscientific elements, the statistical improbability of the case, and the data monitored during the coma. However, every time the doctor was called upon to validate the content, he hesitated. Something inside him prevented him from authorizing the publication. Not out of fear, but because he knew that there were parts of the story that could never be captured by graphs, lab tests, or research protocols. Then, late one afternoon, he received a message from her, "The time has come." He returned to the hospital, went up to room 714, and found the patient sitting by the window, looking out with a serenity almost impossible for someone who had spent so much time between life and death. She asked for silence. And she began to narrate. She said that during her coma, she not only witnessed scenes from her own life, but was taken, or guided, by something she described as a presence. It had no definite form, did not speak with words, but communicated through sensations, through certainty. She said she saw structures similar to cities, but made of light, and that each one was inhabited by consciousnesses that no longer had bodies. Some of these consciousnesses observed the world of the living, others seemed to interfere. But there was one rule: nothing could be forced. A voluntary connection was needed, real link between those who were here and those who were there. According to her, that link was touch. Not just physical touch, but the real intention behind it. The gesture of someone who, even in the face of protocol and the coldness of the hospital, could still look at an unconscious body and ask, "Do you want to come back?" She said that at that moment, she saw not only him, but the entire timeline that would emerge from that gesture. She saw people being saved by methods that did not yet exist. She saw new medical approaches emerging from a simple discredited case. She saw a network of connections forming, as if her awakening was the first domino falling in a sequence that would change a lot. But there was more. She said that this sequence would only happen if he chose it. It wasn't guaranteed. It was possible, but not inevitable. She was there to remind him, to activate him, to deliver what she called the seed. When she finished, she handed him the piece of paper with the codes. "Keep it. One day someone will ask you for this. And you'll know who it is." He took the paper without understanding, but with the same silent faith that had guided him throughout this journey. The next morning, the patient was discharged. She left the hospital without interviews, without fanfare, just a discreet wave to the doctor, who watched her leave with the certainty that this chapter, although clinically closed, was far from the end of the story. The hospital returned to normal, at least in appearance. But for those who had experienced it up close, normal took on a new meaning. Doctors began to touch their patients more, nurses began to talk more, and glances were no longer hurried. It was as if invisible software had been updated in everyone there. As for the young doctor, he continued to work as usual, but he was never the same again. At conferences, he refused to use the term miracle. In interviews, he shied away from the spotlight. He would simply say that sometimes, just being there can be the difference between someone going or staying. And that, for him, was enough. But, that's not the end of the story. A few months later, he received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a white card. On it was just one sentence: "The door is open." And the same code she had written, this time printed in low relief, as if it were part of an invitation. On the back of the card was an address. A city in the interior of a country he had never visited. Without hesitation, he bought a ticket. He knew that the next phase had begun. Because some stories don't end. They just change phases. And if you've made it this far, it's because you also feel that there's something more to this story. So sign up now. Activate that bell, because the next video will take you to the place where it all began. Let's continue this journey together. Because you, just like him, have also been called. And there is a door waiting for you. What you will find when you walk through it, no one can predict. But one thing is certain: after that, you will never look at life the same way again.